What's going on, guys? This is Martyrs Brigade 99 coming to you once again with another session of Bloodborne Commentary. Alright, guys, so we have the DLC, and I'm really enjoying it. Speaking of the DLC, like that first week, I didn't even really get an opportunity to play it. You know, we had Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, at least in my job, was a holiday, so I was really busy that first week. But you know, after getting more time to play, I realized that a lot of the new weapons I really liked, right? And with a lot of my previous builds, they were all set up for the vanilla game, right? So I had like 4 and 5 plus 10 weapons, sometimes more. You know, and some of that, of course, was doing chalice dungeons and all like that. But a lot of the other ones was just simply going through playthroughs, right? Because I even to this day, I really enjoy the PvE in this game. But you know, by the time I got to Ludwig, like on New Game Plus 4 and 5 and like that, I'm like, holy camole, there is no way I'm going to sit here and do all this. So, you know, just thinking about the new library of weapons that I wanted to add to my collection and the difficulty starting out, you know, at New Game 5 and 6 or maybe 7, I can't even remember. I just decided to go ahead and make a new character altogether, right? So I created a 40-40 character, 40 skill, 40 strength, 10 in blood tinge, and like 15 in arcane. And I think that build is perfect. Like with that particular build, I think I went through 2 playthroughs. Actually, let me take that back. I'm on my second playthrough. So you know, I got the first 5 blood rocks. You know, 3 through chalice dungeons, 2 within the game. And then with me going through the second time, you know, I got 2 more blood rocks. And then the last few I was able to get through doing those depth 5 chalice dungeons, right? So I think I have like 10 or 11 plus 10 weapons. With the 40-40, I'm basically able to use pretty much anything, right? So it's strength, skill. The only weapons I'm not able to use, well, it's my favorite weapon, the Ligarius Will. I can't really use it effectively because you definitely need more than 15 arcane to make that thing hit hard. And I can't use the Moonlight Sword, right? Which I'm going to do a video about that a little later. But despite not being able to use those 2 weapons, I mean, I actually really love this character. I mean, you could do anything with it. You know, you can use 2 skill weapons. You can mess it up with 2 strength weapons. I mean, 1 skill, 1 strength. I mean, all the benefits from having a true quality build, you know, I have with this character. Right. So basically, I have a 40-40 that I play with the vast majority of the time, and then I have a strength arcane that I play with because I love using the will, and that's this character, right? So that's basically what I've been doing all this time, just kind of policing up on those builds. So as far as the DLC, I mean, it's not a letdown, you know. Miyazaki, whoever's on the project, I mean, they really invested a lot of time into this game, right? Both the vanilla game and the DLC, and I think they complement each other well. You know, the vanilla and the DLC. Now, I've heard some people say that the DLC is pretty cheap as far as difficulty, right? I don't think it's cheap. What I think is if anyone has spent a reasonable amount of time in chalice dungeons, especially the depth 5s, you know, and you're going through all the bosses and you're fighting them, I think anyone who has done that, eventually you'll learn to master movesets, right? Because whereas in the vanilla game, you could just kind of go through it, and I'm not saying, you know, it's not as challenging, because to some it is, you know, challenge is relative. But it cannot be denied that fighting a boss at half health is much different than fighting a boss at full health, right? You're limited on the amount of mistakes that you can make, Right. So anyone, I would say anyone who has invested a lot of time, well, I won't even say a lot of time, I'll say as at least as much time in the challenge dungeons as myself. A lot of these bosses, yeah, they can be challenging, but you learn to study the move sets. You learn when to go in, when to go out, not to rush the fight, how to be a little more patient, picking and choosing your attacks, backing off when it's convenient. You learn those things. So at least for me, was it difficult? Well, yeah, of course, because it was something new. You have to learn the move sets, right? Little trial and error. You have to figure out what attacks you can go dash in with. What attacks you should kind of stay back. Especially with that that Ludwig fight. It took me a few tries before I kind of got the rhythm for that fight, as well as all the fights, pretty much. I mean, except for those blue alien looking things. I mean, that wasn't really too much, but I think it was a good mix. You had 3 potentially difficult bosses in that one, right? So it's not a big deal. So as far as the PvP is all my characters are at 120. Now I know a lot of people are still maintaining the 100 meta. I went up to 120 because, as I said on the previous video, I move up with the population, right? When the game was first released, some people were arguing for 110, like within the first week of the game's release. My argument against that was, well, seeing that we don't have a red soapstone summon sign, most of your PvP is going to come from invasions. And at least at that point when the game was first released, we didn't really fully understand the build system, how to take advantage of, vile bloods and getting 3 and 4 people in and all like that, like some of these guys have mastered, right? We didn't have all that information within the first few weeks of the game's release, right? So my thing is, well, looks like you're going to get a lot of your PvP through random invasions. So if that's the way you're going to get your PvP, then you might want to stay with the population. So within the first few weeks, most people, by the time they got to end game, they were somewhere around 75 to 100, right? So 75 to 100 was perfect, within a, I don't know, a month or 2. But with Bloodborne being out, I don't know, 8-9 months, something like that. I kind of forget the actual release date. It's been out for a while. There's a lot of people who have advanced far past 100, right? So taking that into consideration, So taking that into consideration, I figured that, I'll just go ahead and raise all my characters to 120. Not 125, definitely not 150. I took one character to 125, and after I took it to 125, I realized, I'm like, 125, even though it's 5 levels, 120 is good, right? So I play all my characters kind of like the level for Demon Souls. And it's good. I've heard some people say that 120 is quote unquote OP, right? I wouldn't say it's OP. I think especially this late in the game, when you're fighting against other players who are somewhere around your level, you guys both have similar defenses. So, 120 to a 120 is obviously different than a 120 to a 90. Another reason why I send it to 120 is because, kind of like Dark Souls and Demon Souls, you're able to, take advantage of 2 paths. Like for this particular character, I have strength and skill. At 120 to 125 in Dark Souls, you can do the same, 40-40. Or you can go, 45 in dexterity, and I don't know, maybe 30 in faith in Dark Souls. A lot of the faith characters stopped at 30, right? And they just ascended another path, like maybe dexterity. You can buff your Dark Moon Blade, and still have physical stat weapons like katanas and whatnot. So you are able to go ahead and ascend 2 paths, right? Same thing in Demon Souls. Quality builds in Demon Souls, same thing. So that's basically what I do now, right? I just ascend 2 paths, because yes, you can ascend 2 paths at level 100, but like I said before, I like to see maximum potential, like I did in previous games. So, you know, I know a lot of people stick at 100. I'm not making an argument for 100. I mean, I'm not making an argument for anything. I just know that sometimes when people run into me, they're like, holy crap, what level is your character? I'm like, well, 120, and they ask. And it's like, well, I mean, the game is not new anymore, right? The player base is rather experienced, and there's only a segment who will stay at 100, but there's a lot more during random invasions who you're going to run into who are not 100. Right, so 120 allows me to keep up with the 100s, and it allows me to be competitive. Excuse me, and it allows me to be competitive with those who would, you know, increase their levels past 100. So 120 for me is a good level, at least for me. And a lot of my friends who I PvP with, you know, they're also at 120. So, you know, when we're kind of sparring in the chalice dungeons, you know, it's kind of like an equal footing. Right. So that's about it as far as my builds, as far as my initial thoughts with the DLC. Now, one thing I did want to talk about, and actually I don't know if I should kind of wait to talk about this in a different video. Well, maybe I could kind of touch up on it now. Okay, so I've seen a few clips from Dark Souls 3. Obviously, there's a lot of footage, you know. It looks great to me. Like, like in other words, as long as Miyazaki is on the project, I'm sold, right? Now, you have some of these uploaders who, I mean, they always have something negative to say. You know, they're always, but when you look at the evidence that we have, you know, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, which wasn't perfect, but that game was great, especially with regards to PvP, and Bloodborne. Same person, Miyazaki, consistently across the board. Those 3 games have been really, really, really good. And as a matter of fact, I would probably place, actually I would place Bloodborne on top of all of those games overall. Now, I'm not feeling the PvP to the same degree as I did Dark Souls 1, granted, but overall, looking at the difficulty, at the graphics, the dynamic moves, I mean, trick weapons, the whole concept, the art, the graphics, everything, I would put Bloodborne as number 1 in my opinion. But as far as PvP, obviously I would put Dark Souls as number 1. But, you know, so seeing those videos and playing Bloodborne, it kind of got me thinking, you know, I'm really hoping there will be a poise system. I'm praying for a poise system, not like that fake ass poise system in Dark Souls 2, right, where you needed like 110 poise just to poise through a damn dagger. No broken shit like that, but I mean something similar to Dark Souls 1, because I really believe that if we do not have a poise system, depth will be lacking, right? I'm not saying that the PvP will be bad, right? So for a lot of you guys, I want you to pay close attention to what I'm saying. I think it will be lacking. One of the things that kind of lacks in Bloodborne, in my opinion, is a poise system. The PvP could be so much better with a poise system. Now, okay, with me saying that, I know some of you guys may say, holy shit, Brigade, I mean, how would you know, incorporate a poise system in Bloodborne? Well, this is how I would do it. For example, I'm using Amygdala's arm, right? Now, these numbers are just going to be for just to compare games, right? Obviously, I'm not talking about absolutes, but just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So let's just say, you know, there's a whip in one form, because this is technically a strength weapon, and then there's like a heavy mace in the second form. So, for example, I would give the whip a similar poise break as the katana in Dark Souls 1, seeing that it is a strength weapon. So let's just say 31. right? But then once it goes into club form, it would have the poise break as, let's just say, the large club, right? Seeing that it is a strength weapon. And I think that alone, just incorporating a poise system, would definitely increase the depth. Because one thing that absolutely pisses me off in this game is when I'm doing an invasion and you catch these guys just swinging like madmen. The lack of poise and the ease of just being able to spam R1 basically without punishment. Now I know some of you guys will say, well, it's not without punishment, you could just spam the gun. Spamming the gun is not reliable. It's not 100% reliable. You know, there's times when I've been on invasions and trying to fight two guys swinging a weapon, trying to catch them on a parry, on a lucky parry. I could actually get rid of like 10 bullets in some cases. Okay, so let's just look at Dark Souls 1. Very rare in Dark Souls 1 when I was fighting two guys that I have to parry 10 times. Right? And this is just to compare the two games. Very rarely did I have to parry 10 times. Why? Because parrying was more reliable. So, of course you can use the gun, but having a poise system would force people to play differently. You know, like if they notice, like let's just say you got two assholes with Blades of Mercy, right? And let's just say there was a poise system, right? Now, not necessarily to the same degree as Dark Souls 1, but one similar, you know, different numbers and all like that. They would have to pick and choose when they just run up to you and R1 spam, you know, like madmen. They would have to pick and choose, because eventually when you hit them back, it's kind of like, holy shit, that's not going to work. With the way the PvP is now, it's kind of like, well, now I can't speak on you guys' experience, but in most of my experiences doing random invasions, it's just an R1 spam contest. If it's not an R1 spam contest, it's a John Wayne contest. Very rarely do I experience an invasion, whether I'm being invaded or I invade someone, that a person is actually not John Wayning and not R1 spamming. Now, there's nothing wrong with using a gun. I'm not saying that at all. But perhaps I need to get out of my mind, you know, focusing on a gun. It's almost like if I focused on parries in Dark Souls 1 as opposed to using it to supplement my attacks, right? And you guys will see, because as a matter of fact, and actually I don't really want to get into it too long because I intended to make this subject for another video. But in the next video, I'm going to showcase some PvP with friends. It's myself, Artorius88. I have a video with him and myself in Dark Souls 1, and Samuel VS. We used to VF. We used to PvP together in Dark Souls 1 as well. And I think that video is going to be titled, well, I'm not going to tell you what the title is. But anyway, I think the lack of a poise system in this game really causes people to play sloppily. For a lot of you guys who've been with me for a long time, I came up with a video prior to the release of Dark Souls 2, and either the video was titled "Is Stacking Poise the Answer?" or I can't remember. That video probably came out about 2 years ago, but it was prior to the release of Dark Souls 2. I knew there wouldn't be a poise system in Dark Souls 2, and I was just kind of talking about it. As a matter of fact, I'll put a link to that video in the description just in case you guys didn't listen to it. But it's the exact same thing that I was talking about for Dark Souls 2. That thing is happening in Bloodborne, right? It consistently happens. Players are not forced to do better, because you could just easily run up to somebody and R1 spam. The same thing with the guns, and this is the problem that I have with PvP. You're not really forced to do anything better, because there's no valid punishment for gun spamming. Now, there's tactics. There's things that you could do, but there's not a punishment, right? In Dark Souls 1, if someone parry spam, you could punish them. You know, sometime I would two-hand with the claymore and dead angle them. So when they ran up to you and parry, you know, you run up to me a couple times and I hit you with that dead angle, it's kind of like, well, I might need to do something different, you know. Or if someone used that run up parry method enough times and you backstab them enough times, then it's kind of like, well, I might want to do something different. It's nothing like that really in Bloodborne. Nothing stopping the John Wayning, nothing stopping the Madman R1 spamming. So that was one thing that really turned me off, you know, from Bloodborne initially. And I'm still excited with the DLC and there's new weapons and all like that. But whereas in previous games, I preferred to do random invasions, you know, with a mixture of, you know, 101. In this game, I actually, when it's time for me to PvP, you know, I will do random invasions, but I actually prefer PvPing with friends, right? Because we all have similar play styles. And like I said before, I'll upload another video with that a little later. But we actually focus more so on tactics than you know, mindless damn R1 spamming. And I think that right there is what, you know, lacks in this game. A system where people can reliably be punished for sloppy gameplay. And that was one thing that I really loved about Dark Souls 1. And I know I'm sounding like a damn Dark Souls 1 fanboy, but it is what it is. Think about when Dark Souls 1 was first released. Everybody was R1 spamming with Claymores, Moonlight Greatswords because of the stun lock, right? Which was cool. But guess what happened? That slowly changed when people were learning the parry timings, right? As a matter of fact, for you guys who have been with me for a while, think about that parry video that I created for Dark Souls 1, right? And I'm not saying that I'm responsible, of course not. But what I'm saying is, as the player base learned, you know, over time, those parry timings, you saw a lot less R1 spamming, and it forced the player base to change their tactics. Now, of course, some of the new players, you'll run into some new players who would think that R1 spamming was a solution. But as time went on, it's kind of like, you know what? That shit's not going to work anymore. So maybe 2 swings and we're done. You know, maybe 3 swings if it's a gank spank. But just mindless R1 spamming, that crap's not working because now everyone's parrying. Because parrying was reliable. John Wayning is not reliable. It's just something you kind of get, you know, praying that latency and lag is on your side. Right. So enough about that. I think I'll get more in depth when I do some a video with me just PvPing with friends. And actually I'll do that because this video is long enough. And one bad habit that I have, like I don't have cue cards, and a lot of times when I get to talking, I can just talk and talk and talk and talk. So let me just head this video off now. Oh, I got a cold, excuse me. Alright guys, so that'll be it. I'll have another video uploaded within the next few days. I have a crap ton of footage, right? I mean, like, even though I wasn't uploading within the last couple weeks, I was recording tons, right? So I definitely will have some more videos coming up. So like I said before, I'll be back for a few videos for Bloodborne. Interested in exploring a few topics. And hey, until next time, Martyr's Brigade is